hard-pressed to find an organization more dedicated to self-imploding than the WNBA. Here's what I'll say about Caitlin Clark. She is the golden goose of the WNBA, and they will not accept it. Is it because she's white? Maybe. Is it because she's straight? Maybe. I actually just think, Brian, that it's just jealousy all around. Now, I think that Caitlin Clark was the queen of the WNBA before she ever even played a game. She is a generational talent that revolutionized the game of basketball, who also happens to be white and straight. And that is why they hate her. She sells out arenas. When Caitlin Clark was injured last season, national WNBA viewership dropped over 50%. You remove her entirely, and the league goes back to ground zero, where it started before she arrived.
This situation has crossed a boundary that the WNBA cannot walk back from. And anyone who thinks this story is going to quietly disappear over the next news cycle has fundamentally misread how far this has already traveled.
That discourse takes away from the greatness of the game, because this game can't just be a game. These moments can't just be tense moments between competitors, because it always blows up into what we're seeing now, which is, again, really ugly discourse and players at the center of it. Like when you think about Alyssa Thomas, right? This was a foul that should have been addressed. The league addressed it, and you know, the world keeps moving. But now Alyssa Thomas is on the receiving end of racist comments on social media, hateful comments on social media, that it gets to a level it just shouldn't ever get to. And for what? For what? In defense of Caitlin Clark? That's not something Caitlin Clark wants to see other people in the league going through. So it's just, it's something that I keep hoping and praying levels off, but I haven't seen that yet.
What started as a conversation about officiating and player safety inside a professional basketball league has become something considerably larger, considerably more serious, and considerably more difficult for any institution to contain or manage through silence and minimal disciplinary responses.
For the players responsible is drawing some massive backlash, and fans are asking why the league allows this abuse, because that's what it is, to keep happening. Yep. Caitlin Clark, she's not the only high-profile player in the WNBA, but she certainly brought a new excitement to the game, to women's basketball. No doubt. But they want to snuff her out.
I get it to the extent of, hey, you're a rookie, like, earn your spot. But, I mean, she's been around for, what, 3 years now? I mean, in sports, you know, you're getting close to being a veteran at 3 or 4 years. I don't know why, unless she's just rotten and I don't know it, I don't know why everyone's so mad at her.
That would be like Major League Baseball saying, you know, Shohei Ohtani, you sit down for a while. Yes. Let somebody else take the spotlight. No, it's like the merit of the game. Exactly. And she's a good player, and she draws a lot of fans, and they can't stand it.
We need to have a genuinely honest conversation about the scale of what is now happening, because the scope has expanded in ways that demand serious acknowledgement. A professional athlete was assaulted on national television. Those words need to be stated clearly and without softening, because that is the language that the broader public, the media, and now international observers are using to describe what occurred when Caitlin Clark was struck during a WNBA game, while referees with direct lines of sight to the incident allowed play to continue without intervention. This is not hyperbolic framing invented by partisan content creators operating in a niche sports media space. This is the description being applied to this incident by major national news outlets, by commentators who have no particular investment in women's basketball politics, and now by media organizations operating on the other side of the planet.
The Indiana Fever veteran Sophie Cunningham, who went viral over her finger wagging over this latest incident, is trashing the WNBA for allowing her teammate, Caitlin Clark, to get targeted repeatedly. And then the league apparently really doing nothing to stop it.
This type of happens every single game to her, and the league and the refs do absolutely nothing about it. They're definitely targeting her, and the league and the refs do nothing to protect her.
The WNBA wants a pat on the back for what? Suspending Alyssa Thomas, who did the big fist to the neck thing, for one game. That's not going to stop anyone from doing anything against Clark. Now, these refs are ignoring literal, these are assaults. She's the best thing that ever happened to that league, and they're letting her get pummeled. What is going on here? Here to weigh in is Dan Dockich, host of Outkicks. Don't at me. Dan, why isn't the WNBA doing more to protect?
The story has reached Australia. Let that register fully. International reporters are now covering an incident involving an American professional athlete being subjected to physical conduct that went unpenalized in real time, with the implicit endorsement of inaction from the officials whose entire professional function is to prevent exactly that kind of conduct from occurring. When an incident originating in a domestic professional sports league generates coverage halfway across the world, the institution at the center of it has a crisis on its hands that extends far beyond the boundaries of sports media discourse. This is no longer a WNBA problem in the narrow sense. This has become an American problem in the fullest sense of that phrase. And the question of who responds to it, and how, and with what level of urgency, is no longer confined to the commissioner's office or the league's communications department. There is a credible argument being made, and it is gaining traction in serious media spaces, that the Trump administration may need to weigh in on what occurred. Consider the context in which this is happening. The United States is currently in an anniversary year, 250 years as a nation, and the image being broadcast internationally is one of a professional athletic league allowing one of its most visible American athletes to be physically targeted on national television without meaningful consequence from the officials responsible for player safety. International reporters are not framing this as a basketball dispute. They are framing it as an American institution failing to protect one of its own athletes in full public view. That framing has implications that stretch beyond the WNBA's competitive season and into questions about standards, accountability, and the integrity of professional sports governance in this country. Now let us address a specific and significant development in the broader media response to this situation, because it reveals how far the conversation has shifted from where it was even a short time ago.
That this ultimately has a racial underpinning to it. I don't watch the WNBA, but I know talent when I see it.
Well, there's no question there's a racial underpinning to it. The reason the WNBA doesn't chime in is because the league is run by angry African-American lesbians. Let's just be honest. That's what the league has been. That's what the power structure has been. And Caitlin Clark is not. She is a heterosexual. People ask, well, you know, it can't be race because they accept folks like Paige Beckers and other white lesbians. That's a big deal in the WNBA, and if anybody gets offended by what I'm saying, go sit in the corner. Tough, because that is absolute, and it started the moment Caitlin Clark got into the league. And you know what else? You know what, Laura? It's all cowardice. It's all hits from behind like the first one, Kennedy Carter, a poke in the eye when she shoots a jump shot, going to the throat when she's already down. You know, it's one thing, you get a hard foul going to the rim, but these women have been cowards to Caitlin Clark, and it's ridiculous, but the WNBA doesn't do anything because they are afraid of the angry African-American lesbian woman who has dominated that league for years.
And there's suggestion that the mere Sophie's pointing at the young woman who put the fist down, her point was racist. So now you can't point when you see injustice. Only one side can point. I don't understand that.
Well, like I said, that's exactly where this league is. And here comes Caitlin Clark, right? She's got all the hype coming out of Iowa. She has a boyfriend. She's the new superstar, and there's a lot of anger with that. The pettiness is in there, too, and, of course, the jealousy. My wife coached for 30 years in softball, and she's a legend in that sport. And she told me when Caitlin Clark came in, you watch what happens. She's going to get physically pounded because women in sports don't want to see other women succeed to the level that Caitlin Clark is. There is so much pettiness. There is so much jealousy. But the undercurrent of the entire thing from the WNBA side and from the player side is racist and sexism. She's heterosexual. She's white. They can't stand that she has this popularity, and we've seen it for 3 years now.
Do you think she's going to stay in the league the way she's being treated and why this is going?
Dan Dockich has been one of the more persistent critics of Caitlin Clark throughout this season. He is someone with a public platform and a history of commentary that has not been sympathetic to the concerns raised about how Clark is treated in the league. He is also, by acknowledged public record, someone with a close relationship with Stephanie White. His perspective on Clark-related controversies has historically aligned with the institutional positions that have minimized those concerns rather than amplifying them. And now Dan Dockich has publicly called out the Indiana Fever's front office for failing to protect Caitlin Clark. Read that again slowly. The person who has been among the most consistent critics of Clark's supporters, who has maintained relationships with the coaching staff that observers have identified as part of the problem surrounding Clark's environment, has now arrived at a public position where he is criticizing the organization for not doing enough to protect her. That is not a minor development. That is a seismic shift in the commentary landscape surrounding this situation. When voices that have been institutionally aligned with minimizing Clark's concerns begin publicly acknowledging that the failure to protect her is real and organizational in nature, the ground has moved in ways that cannot be reversed. The Fever's front office, including general manager Amber Cox, now faces scrutiny, not just from Clark's supporters, but from commentators who have historically been skeptical of those concerns. That convergence of criticism from multiple directions, from people who do not share a common ideological or fan loyalty framework, is the kind of pressure that produces institutional responses when nothing else has. The broader arc of this story is now impossible to ignore, and it matters that we understand exactly how it has developed to this point. Caitlin Clark arrived in the WNBA as the most commercially transformative player the league had ever seen. She brought audiences, ratings, sold-out arenas, and cultural relevance that the league had been unable to generate on its own for decades. The responsible institutional response to that kind of commercial and cultural impact is to build a protective framework around the asset driving it, to ensure that the playing environment, the officiating standards, and the organizational structures surrounding her reflect the understanding of what she represents and what the league stands to lose if she is damaged, diminished, or driven away. What has happened instead is a failure of institutional responsibility at multiple levels simultaneously. The league allowed a pattern of physical targeting to develop without addressing it with consequences serious enough to alter behavior. The officiating structure produced documented instances of inconsistent enforcement that observers across the political and media spectrum have identified as problematic. The organization directly responsible for Clark's professional environment made decisions that generated sustained and serious public concern about whether her interests were being prioritized or undermined. And the commissioner's office responded to all of it with the institutional equivalent of a shrug, issuing a one-game suspension after an incident that national news outlets are describing as an assault on national television. None of this happened in a vacuum. None of this is disconnected from the others. It is a connected series of institutional decisions and institutional failures that have collectively produced a situation where international reporters are now covering the story of an American professional athlete being physically targeted without consequence, and where calls are emerging for the highest levels of American political leadership to address what has occurred. The WNBA wanted this story to go away. The signals from league communications have been consistent with an organization hoping that minimizing the disciplinary response and moving the news cycle forward would allow the incident to recede from public attention. That strategy has failed completely. Fox News is covering it. Australian media is covering it. Commentators who were previously aligned with institutional positions minimizing Clark's concerns are now publicly criticizing the organization for failing to protect her. The story has not contracted. It has expanded. It has crossed borders, political affiliations, and media ideological lines to become something that no single institutional narrative can contain or redirect. What the WNBA is confronting right now is the compounded consequence of every inadequate response, every insufficient suspension, every missed whistle, and every public statement that prioritized institutional comfort over honest accountability. Those decisions were made one at a time, each one seemingly manageable in isolation. Together, they have produced a moment where the league's credibility is being examined not just by its existing fan base, but by a genuinely broad national and international audience that is forming first impressions about whether this institution deserves the trust and attention of the public it is asking to invest in it. First impressions formed in crisis carry enormous weight. They are difficult to revise. They establish frameworks through which everything that follows gets interpreted. The WNBA is currently forming first impressions for millions of new observers who came to the sport because of Caitlin Clark and are now watching how the institutions surrounding her respond when her safety and dignity are at stake. What they are seeing is not reassuring. The path forward requires something that has been conspicuously absent throughout this entire situation: genuine, decisive, and publicly visible accountability. Not a one-game suspension. Not a carefully worded statement from a communications department. Not silence from a commissioner hoping the cameras look elsewhere. What is required is a clear and public commitment that the officiating failures surrounding this incident will be formally reviewed, that the standards for protecting players from physical targeting will be enforced with consequences proportionate to the conduct, and that the organizational structures surrounding Clark at Indiana will be examined honestly for whether they reflect the league's stated commitment to her success and safety. Anything less than that level of response is another installment in the same pattern of institutional inadequacy that produced this crisis in the first place. The story is not ending. It is not receding. It is being reported in Australia. It is on Fox News. Commentators who spent this entire season defending the institutional positions that minimize Clark's concerns are now publicly calling out the front office for failing to protect her. The political conversation about whether this situation demands a response from the highest levels of American leadership is gaining genuine traction. The league had an opportunity at every stage of this situation to get ahead of it, to respond with the seriousness it demanded, to demonstrate through action rather than through carefully managed language that it understood what was at stake and was prepared to protect it. Every one of those opportunities has passed. What remains is the question of whether the WNBA will finally recognize, clearly and without further delay, that the moment for adequate response has not yet passed entirely, but it is closing faster than the league appears to understand. The world is watching. That is not a metaphor. That is a literal description of what is currently happening. And the world is waiting to see whether this institution is capable of protecting the athlete who saved it, or whether it will continue down a path of institutional failure until there is nothing left to protect.